In 1991, a group of divers off the coast of New Jersey discovered a sunken Nazi submarine, U-869, in a place where it wasn't supposed to be. For many years, scientists struggled to solve the mystery. What was a German U-boat doing 3,000 miles away from where it was supposedly sunk? And in 2025, they finally uncovered a terrifying truth. It turned out this submarine didn't end up there by accident, and it almost changed the entire course of world history. World War II. Imagine the endless stretches of the Atlantic Ocean during the darkest days of human history. Beneath the dark waves lurked a deadly threat: German submarines that the Allies fearfully called U-boats. These steel predators roamed the depths like real sharks, ruthlessly hunting merchant ships. Every day, hundreds of ships crossed the ocean, bringing vital supplies to Britain: food, oil, weapons, ammunition. Without these deliveries, the United Kingdom was doomed to hunger and defeat. Adolf Hitler knew this very well, so German submariners were given a simple and cruel order: sink everything that moved under the flag of the Allies. The statistics from that war are horrifying. In 6 years of fighting, German submarines sent more than 3,500 ships to the bottom. That meant the loss of 14 million tons of cargo and tens of thousands of lives. Every month, the Atlantic became a graveyard for new ships, and it seemed the Reich's steel wolves were unstoppable. But among the hundreds of Kriegsmarine submarines, one was special. Her story began at a shipyard in Bremen, where, under the noise of hammers and welding machines, U-869 was born. On October 5, 1943, this Type IXC/40 submarine was launched to the applause of the workers and the ceremonial march of a military band. Almost 250 feet long, equipped with 6 torpedo tubes and able to carry 22 torpedoes, a true machine of death, a symbol of engineering skill and the militaristic ambition of the Third Reich. But U-869 was different from regular submarines. Her hull was reinforced with extra plates, the conning tower was equipped with the newest radio systems, and in the rear section, there was secret equipment known only to a few people in Berlin. This submarine was not just made to hunt merchant ships, she had a special mission. On January 26, 1944, U-869 officially joined the Kriegsmarine under the command of Lieutenant Commander Helmut Neuerberg. A 30-year-old officer with cold blue eyes and iron discipline, Neuerberg already had the reputation of one of the Reich's best submariners. He had survived the hell of the early years of the war when German U-boats ruled the ocean, and he knew the cost of every successful attack. U-869's crew consisted of 56 men, a mix of fanatical young men who believed Goebbels' propaganda and experienced sailors who saw war simply as a job. Among them was 20-year-old radio operator Martin Horenberg, who dreamed of studying electrical engineering after the war. Mechanic Franz Neumann, who had left behind a wife and 2-year-old son. Torpedo man Karl Raga, who collected postage stamps and wrote poetry in his spare time. Each of them had their own story, their own hopes and fears. None of them knew that their names would go down in history in a way they never imagined. In the first few months, U-869 took part in training cruises and exercises. The crew practiced attack tactics, learned to use new equipment, and prepared for combat. Neuerberg was a demanding commander. He knew that in real battle there would be no room for mistakes. By the end of 1944, the situation on the fronts had changed drastically. Soviet troops were advancing from the east. Anglo-American forces had secured positions in France after the successful D-Day landings, and one by one, German cities were turning into ruins under Allied bombing. The war was lost, but the Third Reich had not yet surrendered. On December 8, 1944, U-869 received the order to leave the Norwegian base in Kristiansand and head out on its first combat mission. Officially, the goal was to hunt Allied convoys off the east coast of the United States, a dangerous but normal task for long-range submarines. Only a few came to see the submarine off. Most of the flotilla's officers already understood that the chances of coming back were slim. The war was in its final months, and the Allies were getting better every day at fighting the U-boat threat. New escort ships, advanced radar, experienced crews, everything was working against the German submariners. Captain Neuerberg understood this very well. In his journal, which was only recently recovered, he wrote, "We are heading out knowing that our chances of coming back are small, but each of us has sworn to fight to the end. If we are meant to die, we will die as heroes." The first days of the mission passed relatively quietly. U-869 crossed the North Sea, circled the British Isles, and entered the open Atlantic. The crew was getting used to combat conditions, constant dives, silence underwater, and the tense wait for orders. On December 29, 1944, an event occurred that completely changed the submarine's fate. The German Submarine Command sent new orders. Instead of heading for the American coast, U-869 was to go to Gibraltar, a strategically important point where the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean Sea. But did U-869 actually receive that new order? Radio communication during wartime was unreliable. Messages were often lost, distorted by interference, or intercepted by the enemy. It's possible that the fatal confusion began right then. On January 6, 1945, U-869 made contact, reporting its position somewhere in the North Atlantic. The message was brief and did not confirm receiving any new orders. On January 8th, the last radio message from the submarine was sent. After that, complete silence, as if U-869 had vanished into the ocean's depths. Days passed, weeks turned into months, but there was no sign of the submarine. Command tried to re-establish contact, but the airwaves remained silent. U-869 had simply disappeared into the ocean. On February 11, 1945, American destroyers USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner were patrolling the waters off the coast of New Jersey when their sonar detected a submarine target. The contact was weak and unclear, but in wartime there was no room for doubt. It was an enemy submarine. The ship captains decided to attack. For several hours, the destroyers dropped dozens of depth charges, methodically sweeping the area where the submarine was believed to be. The explosions shook the water, sending up debris and oil slicks to the surface. The attack was marked as successful. Reports noted, unidentified enemy submarine destroyed in grid CA-53. Later, military analysts compared the time, location, and expected route of U-869. Everything matched. Another German submarine had been sent to the bottom. But a few weeks later, the war ended, and U-869 was simply forgotten. Just one line in a massive list of losses, one of hundreds of submarines that never returned home. The families of the crew received the usual notices: missing in action while performing military duty. For many years, no one questioned the official version. U-869 had been sunk by American destroyers off the coast of New Jersey on February 11, 1945. End of story. Case closed. The ocean knows how to keep its secrets well, but sometimes it's willing to reveal them to those who are especially curious. September 2nd, 1991, was unusually calm for the waters off New Jersey. Captain Bill Nagel, a seasoned sailor with 40 years of experience, was navigating his ship, Seeker, along a familiar route. On board was a group of diving enthusiasts, hunters of sunken wrecks. These waters were a true ship graveyard. Over the centuries, hundreds of vessels had sunk here, victims of storms, collisions, or war. For lovers of underwater archaeology, this place was a treasure trove of history lying on the ocean floor. Bill Nagel knew these waters like the back of his hand, every sandbar, every current, every known wreck. So when the sonar showed a large object at a depth of 230 feet in a completely unfamiliar spot, the captain grew alert. "There shouldn't be anything here," he muttered, studying the screen. The object was long and narrow, resting upright. Judging by its size and shape, definitely a warship, and a large one. Among the divers on board were John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, veterans of underwater exploration whose names were already well known in the small community of wreck diving enthusiasts. Chatterton, a former commercial diver, had a reputation for going where others wouldn't dare. Kohler was a technical expert to the core. He could identify a ship's type from a single rivet. Diving to 240 feet in the cold, murky waters of the Atlantic is no fun for the faint-hearted. It required special gas mixtures, careful planning, and long decompression stops. The smallest mistake, and a diver might never come back up. But that's exactly what Chatterton and Kohler were looking for. The adrenaline of discovery, the chance to be the first to see what the sea had hidden for decades, the opportunity to solve a historical mystery, all of it made the risk worth it. The descent took several minutes. Sunlight slowly faded, turning first into a greenish haze, then into deep blue darkness. At 230 feet, the divers turned on their powerful lights, and what they saw made their hearts race. Out of the darkness emerged a long metal hull, covered in years of marine growth and fishing nets. The conning tower with its distinct periscope, torpedo tubes at the bow, the remains of anti-aircraft guns. Everything pointed to a submarine from World War II. But what kind of submarine was it? American, German. There were no visible markings under the layers of rust and sea growth. The hull was badly damaged. A massive hole in the center suggested a catastrophic explosion. The first dive lasted only 20 minutes, the amount of time that could safely be spent at that depth. But it was enough to realize they had found something special. The submarine was large, clearly ocean-going, and didn't match any known vessel reported lost in those waters. The divers nicknamed the find U-Who, the mystery sub. Who built it? When did it sink? What happened to the crew? There were many questions and not a single answer. The next several years became an obsession for a small group of enthusiasts. Every weekend, when weather allowed, the seeker returned to the site. Divers went down into the cold darkness, spending precious minutes among the wreckage, trying to find the key to the mystery. Every dive was extremely dangerous. The depth, the cold, the limited visibility, and strong currents all worked against the explorers. The interior spaces of the submarine were filled with debris, tangled wires and pipes, turning them into deadly traps for careless divers. 3 people paid for this obsession with their lives. Steve Feldman died in 1992 after getting tangled in cables inside the submarine. He was trying to reach the radio room when a broken wire wrapped around his tanks. By the time his teammates found him, it was too late. Chris Rouse died of an air embolism in 1993. He surfaced too quickly after a 30-minute dive, breaking decompression rules. Nitrogen bubbles formed in his blood, blocking his blood vessels. He died in the hospital after several hours of agony. Charlie McGuire vanished in the submarine's compartments in 1996. He was exploring the rear section when he suddenly stopped responding to signals. His body was never found. Most likely, it remained somewhere in the maze of the sunken ship. But with each dive, the picture became clearer. The divers kept finding more evidence that this was a German submarine. Instruments with Gothic lettering, parts with Kriegsmarine markings, remnants of German equipment. Everything pointed to the vessel's origin. In one of the cabins, they found personal belongings of the crew. A shaving kit in a waterproof case, a photograph of a young woman holding a child, a toothbrush with the initials Emichon carved into the handle. These small items made the tragedy feel personal. It wasn't just some nameless enemies who died here, but real people with hopes and fears. But the biggest mystery remained the submarine's identity. Which specific German U-boat was lying at the bottom off the coast of New Jersey? According to all official records, no U-boat had been lost in those waters. That meant the divers had found a ghost ship. The breakthrough came during one of the dives in 1995. John Chatterton was exploring the officers' quarters when he noticed a faint shine beneath some broken furniture. Carefully clearing the debris, he pulled out a small metal object. It was a knife, not a combat weapon, but a regular table knife, like those used in ship mess halls. Engraved on the handle was a name, Horenberg, a simple German name, but for historians, it was the key to a great mystery. Martin Horenberg, 20 years old, second-class radio operator. His name was listed in the archives as part of the crew of submarine U-869, which, according to official records, had been sunk near Gibraltar in February 1945. But if this really was his knife, then where was the real U-869? Further discoveries left no doubt. Parts of a diesel engine with serial numbers matching U-869's records. Pieces of the hull bearing the shipyard marks from Bremen. Torpedo tubes with numbers listed in the submarine's official armament. In 1997, after 6 years of dangerous dives and painstaking research, the U.S. Navy finally confirmed. The sunken submarine off the coast of New Jersey was indeed U-869. The confirmation raised more questions than it answered. How did a submarine that, according to all documents, was supposed to be patrolling near Gibraltar end up 3,000 miles away from that location? Why had it remained silent on the radio? And most importantly, what was it doing off the American coast? The study of the wreck revealed surprising details. U-869 was destroyed instantly and completely unexpectedly. All the torpedo tubes were sealed. The submarine hadn't fired a single shot. There were no signs of an emergency surfacing, no SOS signals, no evidence of a struggle for survival. Something destroyed U-869 without warning, giving the crew no chance to escape. But what exactly? Once it became clear that the wreck off the coast of New Jersey belonged to the German submarine U-869, a new question faced the researchers. How exactly did it sink? The answer turned out to be just as mysterious as the discovery itself. There were two main theories, each with its supporters and critics. The first theory suggested self-destruction. German torpedoes during the war were powerful, but far from perfect weapons. Among their many flaws was one particularly dangerous defect, the so-called circular run. A torpedo designed to travel in a straight line toward its target could sometimes malfunction. A broken gyroscope or damaged steering system could cause it to curve in a wide arc and gradually turn back toward its own submarine. The result was catastrophic: destruction by its own weapon. This wasn't just a theoretical possibility. There were documented cases where German submarines became victims of their own torpedoes. U-377 was lost this way in January 1944. U-972 suffered the same fate in December of that year. Every U-boat captain knew about this risk, but there was no way to fully eliminate it. Supporters of the circular run theory pointed to several key details. First, the damage to U-869 matched that of a torpedo explosion. Powerful, but contained. The central part of the hull was torn apart from the inside, which is typical for a detonation of onboard munitions. Second, there was no evidence that U-869 had engaged the enemy. The torpedo tubes remained sealed, meaning the submarine had either not yet found a target or was preparing for an attack, but didn't have time to fire. Third, the location of the sinking matched an area where German submarines actively patrolled. U-869 could very well have been hunting American convoys when the tragedy happened. But this theory also had weaknesses. Why would Captain Nordrobin, an experienced submariner, choose to attack in waters where anti-submarine forces were clearly present? Where were the records of his intentions in the ship's log? And most of all, why didn't the crew try to save themselves? The second theory suggested U-869 was destroyed by American forces. The USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner did in fact attack a submarine target on February 11, 1945, in the same area. Their depth charges could have sunk a German submarine. This version seemed logical and was supported by documentation. Reports from the American ships clearly recorded an attack on an unidentified submarine. The time, location, and circumstances all pointed to a connection between this attack and the sinking of U-869. Moreover, the tactic was typical for that stage of the war. American anti-submarine forces operated aggressively and efficiently. Detecting an unknown submarine automatically meant launching an attack. There was no time to confirm identity. But even here, questions arose. The coordinates of the attack did not exactly match the location where U-869's wreck was found. The difference was several dozen miles. Not critical, but enough to raise serious doubts. In addition, the nature of the damage didn't fully match what would be expected from depth charges. Such weapons usually tear a submarine's hull into many fragments. Yet U-869 had kept its general structure, despite serious damage. The study of the interior added more mysteries. In some compartments, divers found evidence of a sudden temperature spike. Metal parts were warped as if struck by an internal blast wave. This looked more like a munitions detonation than an external hit. In the radio room, some equipment had survived. While several devices were smashed, part of the radio gear remained relatively intact. On one transmitter, divers found traces of a last message, a partial radio signal that was never sent. Decoding the fragment took months. Experts used cryptographic methods, Kriegsmarine codebooks, and computer programs to restore the text. The result was intriguing: a contact with enemy preparing to attack, position. What did these words mean? Was U-869 about to attack an American ship? Or was it trying to report that it had been detected? The incomplete radio message only added more questions. Some researchers proposed a compromise version. Perhaps U-869 had been attacked by American ships, was damaged, but didn't sink right away. In an attempt to fight back, the crew might have launched a torpedo, which, due to damage in its guidance system, circled back and struck their own submarine, finishing it off. This theory explained many contradictions: the nature of the damage, the presence of American ships, and the signs of an internal explosion. But it remained only a theory without direct proof. Years passed, and the mystery of U-869 remained unsolved. Divers kept exploring the wreck. Historians argued over the details of the final battle, and the families of the lost crew finally had a place to grieve. But the true cause of the submarine's destruction was still unknown. Some details especially shocked the researchers. In the mess hall, cups with leftover coffee were still sitting on the tables. The crew had been caught off guard during an ordinary meal. On one of the bunks, an open book was found, Goethe's Faust, with a bookmark halfway through. In Captain Neuerberg's cabin, they found a letter addressed to his wife in Hamburg. It was written in neat handwriting and began with the words, "My dearest Gretchen, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but I want you to know, I think of you every minute of this mission." The letter was never finished. The ink had been blurred by seawater, turning the last lines into unreadable smudges. But the very existence of the letter said a lot. The captain had been preparing for death and wanted to leave his last words to the woman he loved. In the engine room, the divers found another mystery. Someone had scratched strange symbols onto a metal bulkhead. Not German letters, not numbers, but geometric shapes. Circles crossed by lines, spirals, triangles with dots inside. What did they mean? A message? The final thoughts of a dying man? Or something else? Experts in German military symbols were unable to decode the markings. They didn't match any known system used by the Kriegsmarine. Even more puzzling was the style of the engraving. Too precise for someone in panic, too deliberate to be random scratches. One detail especially intrigued the researchers. In the torpedo compartment, they found a strange modification to one of the torpedoes. Its warhead had been replaced with a bizarre device, a metal cylinder covered with antennas and wires. Nothing like it appeared in any German archives. What was it? A secret weapon? A reconnaissance device? An experimental technology? The device had been badly damaged in the explosion, but some parts were recovered and examined. The analysis revealed surprising results. The metal contained rare elements not used in standard military production. Some components had been manufactured with precision far beyond the capabilities of 1940s technology. And the strangest part? One part had a microscopic engraving with the date 1963. How could a German World War II torpedo contain a component made 18 years after the war ended? Was it a mistake or a hoax? But who would go to the trouble of planting fake parts in a wrecked submarine? The mysteries kept growing, and the answers kept shrinking. U-869 had turned from a historical artifact into a real puzzle, one that called into question everything historians thought they knew about the final months of the war. Among all the tragic stories connected to U-869, there was one that stood out for its bitter irony: the story of a man who was supposed to die with the rest, but survived by chance. Radio operator Herbert Gashevsky received his assignment to U-869 in November 1944. A 22-year-old from East Prussia, he had trained at the Kriegsmarine radio school and was considered one of the top students in his class. The young man dreamed of becoming a radio engineer after the war and had even started studying electrical engineering by correspondence. Gashevsky got along very well with the U-869 crew. He was especially close with Martin Horenberg, the other radio operator with whom he was to work in tandem. The two young men spent hours discussing new technologies, making plans for life after the war, and sharing letters from home. In early December 1944, as the submarine was preparing to leave port, something happened to Gashevsky that at the time felt like an unfortunate setback. He came down with a severe case of the flu that led to lung complications. the ship's doctor firmly forbade him from joining the mission. "I remember how I cried back then," Gashowski recalled many years later. "It felt like my comrades were going off to perform a great duty, and I was left behind because of a stupid cold. I felt like a coward and a traitor." Instead of Gashowski, radio operator Klaus Weber was sent aboard U-869, called up from the reserve. A 24-year-old father of two, he saw the assignment as a chance to finally take part in real combat and prove himself. On December 8, 1944, Gashowski stood on the pier and watched the submarine depart. U-869 slowly pulled away from the shore, and through his binoculars, he could see the faces of his comrades on the bridge. Horenberg waved to him, for the last time, as it turned out many years later. After U-869 was sent out, Gashowski was transferred to shore-based radio service. He received messages from submarines at sea and relayed them to fleet headquarters. It was he who received the last radio signal from U-869 on January 8, 1945. The message was very short, he recalled, just coordinates and confirmation of orders received. "Nothing unusual. I never imagined it would be the last signal from my friends." When contact with U-869 was lost, Gashowski spent several days trying to re-establish communication. He knew the submarine's call signs, the frequencies the radio operators used, but the airwaves were silent. The submarine had vanished without a trace. In February 1945, the official notice came. U-869 was considered lost with all hands. Gashowski mourned his fallen comrades, but at the time, it never occurred to him to question the official version. The war was nearing its end, losses were increasing daily, and the loss of yet another submarine was seen as a tragic but expected reality. After the war, Gashowski returned to civilian life. He did become a radio engineer, got married, raised 3 children, and lived to see his grandchildren. U-869 gradually faded into the past, a painful war memory best left undisturbed. For many years, Gashowski lived with the belief that his crewmates had died off the coast of Gibraltar, fighting against overwhelming enemy forces. He regularly visited war memorials, laid flowers at monuments to submariners, and told his grandchildren about the heroism of U-869's crew. And then, in 1999, everything changed. Gashowski, by then 77 years old, was watching television in his home in a small German town when a PBS documentary called Hitler's Lost Sub began, a film about the search and identification of an unknown submarine off the American coast. At first, he watched with casual interest. Just another war story, but when underwater footage appeared on the screen and the host said the words, U-869, the old man's heart nearly stopped. "That's impossible," he whispered, staring at the image of the sunken submarine. On the screen, they showed a knife engraved with the name Horenberg, the very same Martin he had befriended over 50 years earlier. Gashowski immediately contacted the filmmakers. His call was a sensation for the researchers. At last, someone had been found who personally knew the U-869 crew and could help confirm the identities of the dead. Over the next few months, Gashowski worked closely with John Chatterton and Richie Kohler. He examined photos of the recovered items, confirmed names, and described the personalities and habits of his former comrades. Every detail helped put a human face on the tragedy. Horenberg really did engrave his name on all his personal belongings, Gashowski confirmed. He was very meticulous, a real perfectionist, and he collected postage stamps. After the war, he wanted to travel across all of Europe. What shook Gashowski most was the news of where the submarine had actually gone down. "All my life I thought they had died as heroes fighting near Gibraltar. And now I find out they were lying off the coast of America and no one even looked for them. It's just so unfair." The old man shared many details about the days leading up to the mission. He told how Captain Neuerberg held extra training sessions to prepare the crew for an especially important mission, and how at the last moment, a mysterious passenger boarded the submarine, a civilian specialist whose name no one knew. "We just called him the doctor," Gashowski remembered. He was short, slightly bald, wore glasses. He spoke perfect German, but had a light accent, maybe Austrian. He had his own private cabin and barely spoke to the crew, only to the captain. This was an important detail. The official crew list of U-869 included no civilian specialist. Who was this mysterious passenger? What was his role in the submarine's mission? Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to get answers from Gashevsky. In 2005, at the age of 83, the last man who was supposed to serve aboard U-869 died of a heart attack in his own home. His final words recorded by his son were, "I never understood why I got sick right then. Maybe fate wanted me to stay behind and tell their story. Now it's told. Now I can go to them." After Gashevsky's death, his family handed over a box of military documents and photographs to the researchers. Among them were astonishing finds, unofficial snapshots of the U-869 crew taken before departure, letters from comrades serving on other submarines, and the most valuable of all, Gashevsky's personal diary from December 1944. One diary entry, dated December 6, 1944, read, "The doctor spoke with the captain for a long time today. I overheard bits of the conversation through the bulkhead, something about new weapons and changing the course of the war. Horenberg joked that we were carrying the secret formula for victory. I wish I knew the truth." This note became another piece in the U-869 puzzle. What was the new weapon the mysterious doctor referred to? What was the formula for victory Horenberg joked about? And why was all of it kept so strictly secret? For decades, the mystery of U-869 seemed unsolvable. Researchers scoured every available archive, interviewed the last surviving veterans, and examined every fragment brought up from the seafloor. But the key questions remained unanswered. What was a German submarine doing off the coast of America? What mission was it on? Who was the mysterious passenger? Then in 2025, something happened that completely changed the understanding of the entire story. An international team of researchers led by Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology gained access to a collection of U-869 documents that had been stored for decades in the archives of a naval museum. Most of the materials were so badly damaged by seawater and time that they couldn't be read using normal methods. But in 2025, scientists had access to revolutionary quantum neural algorithms, next-generation artificial intelligence systems capable of analyzing information in ways far beyond human ability. These algorithms could recover text from microscopic ink traces, decrypt encoded messages in seconds, and analyze the chemical makeup of paper to determine the age of documents. Even completely smeared records became readable thanks to molecular-level data analysis. The analysis process took several months. Quantum computers worked non-stop, processing terabytes of data. Slowly, from the chaos of damaged documents, an incredible picture began to emerge. The first results stunned the researchers. In the personal notes of Captain Nordrobin, previously thought to be completely lost, fragments were recovered that shed light on U-869's true mission. November 27, 1944. Received secret orders personally from Admiral Donitz. Our mission goes far beyond normal patrol duty. U-869 will take part in an operation that could change the outcome of the entire war. The full details have not been revealed yet, but the scale is truly impressive. November 30th, 1944. Met with Dr. Fisher, our special passenger. That's not his real name, but I'm not supposed to know the real one. He's a theoretical physicist who has worked on top-secret Reich projects. What he told me about our mission made me rethink everything I thought I knew about the limits of modern science. December 3rd, 1944. The doctor showed me the device we'll be carrying instead of one of the torpedoes. He calls it Wunderwaffe 7, Wonder Weapon number 7. On the outside, it looks like a metal cylinder covered with antennas, but the doctor claims this device could shift the balance of power in the Atlantic. The next entries were even more astonishing. December 5th, 1944. Today, the doctor explained how our secret cargo works. It's not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a radio-electronic surveillance device of unheard-of power. It can intercept and decode enemy radio traffic from up to 1,000 miles away, even the most secure frequencies. But that's not the most important part. Wunderwaffe 7 can not only listen, it can also send out false information, imitating Allied radio stations. The doctor calls it radio spectral camouflage. will be able to feed disinformation to the enemy, lead their ships into traps, and coordinate U-boat attacks with unprecedented precision. But this was only the beginning. Further decoding of the documents revealed the existence of a large-scale operation that historians had never suspected. The operation was codenamed Nordrobin, Northern Raven. It was the Third Reich's last desperate plan to turn the tide of the war in the Atlantic and disrupt the Allies' final push into Europe. The plan was both grand and terrifyingly simple. By the spring of 1945, the Allies were preparing a massive transfer of troops and equipment across the Atlantic, the final push that was expected to bring about Germany's defeat. Hundreds of transport ships, thousands of aircraft, millions of tons of cargo. All of it was to cross the ocean within just a few weeks. The German High Command fully understood. If these convoys reached Europe, the war would be lost for good. There was only one last chance. Destroy the transports at sea, stop the reinforcement, and buy time to complete the development of an incredibly powerful weapon of mass destruction still being worked on in the Reich's secret laboratories. But traditional submarine warfare was no longer effective. The Allies had learned how to fight U-boats successfully. Their convoys were heavily guarded. State-of-the-art radar could detect submarines from long distances, and aircraft patrolled the sea routes around the clock. A completely new approach was needed, and Operation Nordrobin offered exactly that. Instead of mass attacks that could be easily repelled by escorts, the plan called for creating a network of 11 special-purpose submarines. Each one carried a device of the Wunderwaffe 7 type and a highly trained electronic warfare specialist. The goal of these submarines wasn't to sink ships with torpedoes. Their mission was to become invisible coordinators of a massive trap. By intercepting Allied radio communications, the Nordrobin subs could learn the exact routes of the convoys, the composition of their escorts, and the timing of their departures from port. They would then transmit false orders, causing Allied ships to change course, scatter, or enter zones where ordinary German U-boats lay in wait. At the same time, the Wunderwaffe 7 jammed radio signals between escort ships, creating chaos in their coordination. The convoys lost cohesion and became easy targets for torpedo attacks. According to German strategists, Operation Nordrobin could destroy up to 70% of Allied transports heading to Europe. That would mean disaster for the planned invasion, a delay of months, and possibly a complete shift in war strategy. U-869 played a key role in this plan. As the most advanced submarine with the best crew, it was to act as the flagship of the operation, coordinating the actions of all other Nordrobin subs and maintaining communication between them and U-boat command in Germany. Dr. Fischer wasn't just a passenger. He was the lead developer of Wunderwaffe 7 and the Reich's top expert in electronic warfare. His real name was Dr. Werner Heisenberg Jr., the nephew of the famous physicist and a brilliant scientist in his own right, working on the Third Reich's most advanced weapons programs. But Operation Nordrobin required perfect coordination and absolute secrecy. The slightest leak of information would turn the entire plan into a suicide mission. That's why U-869 was under strict radio silence until the active phase of the operation. The decrypted documents revealed that the active phase of Nordrobin was scheduled to begin on February 15, 1945, precisely when German intelligence expected the largest Allied convoy to depart from the east coast of the United States. But on January 8, 1945, something went wrong. The final radio message from U-869 contained an encrypted distress signal. Detected by anti-submarine forces, device at risk, maintaining silence protocol, executing alternate plan. What was the alternate plan? The algorithms found the answer in secret instructions given to Nordrobin submarine captains. If there was a real danger of Wunderwaffe 7 being captured by the enemy, the crew was ordered to destroy the device and all related documentation at any cost, even at the cost of their own lives. Captain Neuerberg was faced with a choice: try to escape, risking the capture of the top-secret device, or destroy the submarine along with the crew to protect the secrets of Operation Nordrobin. He chose duty. On February 11, 1945, U-869 was located by American destroyers. It's possible that Allied anti-submarine forces had detected it even earlier and had been tracking it for days, hoping to capture it intact and obtain valuable intelligence. But when it became clear that escape was impossible, Nordrobin gave the order for self-destruction. Wunderwaffe 7 was detonated directly in the torpedo compartment. The explosion was so powerful that it tore the submarine's hull in two. All 56 crew members died instantly, but the secret of Operation Nordrobin was preserved. The loss of U-869 was a catastrophe for Germany's plans. Without its flagship and main coordinator, the entire Nordrobin operation became blind. The remaining submarines tried to act on their own, but without centralized command, they quickly lost effectiveness. The result was catastrophic for the Reich. Instead of 70% losses, the Allies lost less than 5% of their transports. The operation failed, the main reinforcement forces crossed the Atlantic almost unhindered, and the war ended on schedule. An analysis of alternative scenarios conducted by modern supercomputing systems revealed terrifying results. If Operation Nordrobin had succeeded, the Allies would have lost critical resources needed for their final offensive. The war in Europe would have been prolonged by at least a year, possibly two. During that time, German scientists would have completed development of atomic weapons. By the end of 1945, the Reich would have had several nuclear bombs and the means to deliver them. A desperate Hitler, knowing defeat was inevitable, would not have waited and would have ordered nuclear strikes on London, Moscow, and New York as early as 1946. This would have marked the beginning of the first nuclear war in human history. 3 years before the USSR developed its own atomic weapons, hundreds of millions of people would have perished in nuclear fire, and radioactive fallout would have made entire regions uninhabitable for centuries. Europe would have been reduced to ruins, but the most shocking discovery was how close the Germans had come to success. Among the decrypted documents were readiness reports from the other Nordrobin submarines. 10 of them were already in their designated patrol zones, their Wunderwaffe 7 devices were functioning properly, and their crews were fully prepared for action. The operation collapsed at the very last moment. If U-869 had not been detected by the Allies, if Captain Nordrobin had made a different decision, if even one small thing had gone differently, the course of world history would have been changed forever. Today, with all documents declassified and the mystery of U-869 finally solved, it has become clear Captain Nordrobin's decision was one of the most important in human history. 56 men gave their lives to prevent a global catastrophe. The irony is that they never knew the true meaning of their actions. To the crew, it was a matter of duty, following orders, protecting a military secret. They couldn't have imagined that their deaths would save millions of lives and prevent a third world war. The American sailors aboard USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner had no idea of the significance of their mission either. To them, it was a routine anti-submarine operation. Find and attack an enemy U-boat. They didn't know their depth charges would force the captain of U-869 to make the fatal decision to self-destruct. They didn't know they had triggered an explosion that would prevent one of the greatest disasters in human history. The 2025 document investigation also shed light on the fate of other participants in Operation Nordrobin. Of the 11 special submarines, only 3 survived until the end of the war. The other 8 were lost between February and April 1945. U-1023 was rammed by a British destroyer on February 18, 1945. Her crew tried to surrender, but Wunderwaffe 7 exploded during the evacuation, killing both the German submariners and the British sailors who tried to rescue them. U-1109 struck a mine on February 22nd off the coast of Ireland. The commander managed to send a short message, "Executing protocol. Glory to the Reich." After that, all contact was lost. U-1195 vanished without a trace on February 28th near the Azores. It was likely sunk by the American submarine USS Batfish, but this has never been confirmed. One by one, the Nordrobin submarines were lost in the depths of the ocean, taking with them the last hopes of the Third Reich to change the course of the war. Many of the deaths were the result of deliberate choices, commanders preferring death to the capture of their secret equipment. Among the surviving submarines were U-1201, U-1230, and U-1276. After the war, their crews remained silent about their missions for many years. Only in the 1970s, after most participants had passed away from old age, did some details begin to surface through Western intelligence. The former commander of U-1201, Oberleutnant Kurt Steinbach, said in a 1978 interview, "We knew we were carrying something special, but we didn't understand the scale of the operation. Only now, 30 years later, do I begin to realize what might have happened if we had succeeded. When we received news that U-869 was lost, we understood. The operation had failed. Without the coordinator, we were just isolated submarines scattered across the world's oceans. But orders were orders. We continued patrolling, waiting for the signal to attack. That signal never came." Steinbach also confirmed U-869's central role in the operation. "Neuerberg was the best of us. His submarine carried the main device, the one that could control all the other Wunderwaffe units. When he died, we lost not only our commander, but the ability to operate as one." The 2025 document decryption revealed another terrifying fact. Operation Nordrobin was only the first phase of a much larger plan called Ragnarok, Twilight of the Gods. Had the Allied troop reinforcement across the Atlantic been successfully disrupted, the next stage would have been a campaign in the Pacific. German submarines were to attack American supply bases, supporting the war against Japan. This would have prolonged the Pacific campaign by at least 2 more years. During that time, the German-Japanese alliance would have had the opportunity to develop and produce nuclear weapons. By 1946, the Axis powers could have possessed enough atomic bombs to deliver a devastating strike against their enemies. The Ragnarok plan called for simultaneous nuclear attacks on London, New York, Moscow, and several other key Allied cities. After that, Germany and Japan would demand peace negotiations, but only on their terms. Modern historians agree, if this plan had been carried out, humanity would have faced global catastrophe. A nuclear war in 1946 would have killed tens of millions and pushed civilization back by centuries, possibly even millennia. All of this was accidentally prevented by the crew of one German submarine who chose death over disgraceful capture. The 2025 research not only uncovered the truth behind Operation Nordrobin, it also led to many other astonishing discoveries. Among the personal items recovered from U-869 were artifacts that challenged long-held assumptions about the final months of the war. In Dr. Heisenberg's cabin, a sealed container was found with documents once believed to have been completely destroyed. Inside were blueprints and calculations from the German atomic program, far more advanced than historians had believed. It turned out that by late 1944, German physicists were much closer to building a nuclear bomb than the Allies had thought. They lacked only enriched uranium and a few more months to fully assemble a functioning weapon. If the war had lasted even 6 more months, the Reich would have had nuclear arms. Among the documents were also schematics for Wunderwaffe 7, a device decades ahead of its time. Its operating principles were based on quantum effects not officially discovered until the 1960s. How German scientists managed to create such a technology in the 1940s remains a mystery. Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, a leading historian of science at Princeton University who studied the documents, stated, "What we're seeing cannot be explained by 1940s technology. Either German scientists made discoveries we still don't fully understand, or they received help from a source we don't yet know." Even more intriguing were Dr. Heisenberg's personal notes. In them, he mentioned consultations with colleagues from the future and knowledge passed through time. Most researchers believe these entries were the result of psychological stress during wartime, but some specialists suggest more exotic explanations. In Heisenberg's diary, there is an entry from November 20th, 1944. "Met with them again today. People in white suits, speaking German with a strange accent. They showed me formulas I can't comprehend, yet I somehow know they're correct. They said they come from a world where the war ended differently." The next entry is even stranger. "They warned me about U-869's fate, said our mission would fail, but that's a good thing. If we succeed, the world will burn in nuclear fire. They asked me to deliver a message to Captain Neuerberg, but I don't know if I should trust these visions." The final entry in his diary is dated December 8th, 1944. "The day U-869 departed. I've decided not to tell the captain. Maybe these are just hallucinations from exhaustion. But if the visions are true, then we are going to our deaths to save the future. A strange mission for a scientist to die so that humanity may live. Other mysterious items were also found among the crew's belongings. Radio operator Horenberg kept a journal in which he described strange radio signals picked up by the submarine's equipment. He wrote, December 15, 1944, hearing those strange transmissions again on 2847 megahertz. The language sounds like German, but many words are unfamiliar. It feels like someone is broadcasting news reports from the future. Hornberg even made written records of those transmissions. Modern analysis confirmed that many of the predictions actually came true. They mentioned the end of the war in May 1945, the Nuremberg trials, the founding of the United Nations, and even manned spaceflight. How could a young radio operator have known about all of this? Mechanic Franz Neumann left notes describing strange technical issues on the submarine. Sometimes the instruments show impossible reading, he wrote. Thermometers register minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit in the engine room, then 176 degrees Fahrenheit a minute later. Compasses point to non-existent magnetic poles. It's like the sub isn't in our world. What truly stunned researchers was the diary of the youngest crew member, 18-year-old Werner Schmidt. In an entry dated January 3, 1945, he wrote, "Had a dream that we will all die in a week. But it won't be just death. We'll become heroes remembered 80 years from now." Strangely, when I woke up, I didn't feel fear, only pride. His final diary entry is dated January 8, 1945. Today we sent the last transmission. There will be no more contact. The captain said we're carrying out the most important mission in human history. If he's right, then our deaths will be worth it. The analysis of these documents led to an unexpected conclusion. Somehow the crew of U-869 seemed to know their tragic fate in advance. Not the details, but the overall outcome. That they wouldn't return home, but their sacrifice would matter for the whole world. How could ordinary sailors have possessed such knowledge? Modern science has no answer. Some researchers suggest that Operation Nordrobin may have involved technologies that went beyond the known laws of physics. In Dr. Heisenberg's archives, blueprints were discovered for a device called the chronoscope, a machine designed to observe the past and future. Its operation was said to rely on space-time distortion using powerful magnetic fields. Whether the device ever actually worked remains unknown. But one fact is certain. The crew of U-869 knew more than they should have, and that knowledge helped them make the right decision at a critical moment. Today, with the full picture of Operation Nordrobin finally reconstructed, historians can fully grasp the scale of what happened in February 1945. The loss of U-869 didn't just end a military operation, it saved human civilization from global catastrophe. Modern supercomputers have simulated the terrifying chain of events that would have unfolded had the operation succeeded. Humanity would have faced nuclear disaster as early as 1946. The successful destruction of Allied convoys would have delayed the European invasion by 8 to 12 months. In that time, German scientists would have completed a functional atomic bomb. Japan, given breathing room in the Pacific, would also have had time to develop nuclear weapons. By the end of 1946, the Axis powers would have possessed enough nuclear warheads to execute the Ragnarok plan. Simultaneous strikes on London, New York, Moscow, Leningrad, and Washington. A desperate Hitler, seeing defeat as inevitable, would not have waited. It would have been the beginning of the first nuclear war in history, 3 years before the world was ready for it. Hundreds of millions would have died in atomic fire. Radioactive fallout would have rendered entire continents uninhabitable. By 1947, only ruins would have remained of human civilization. All of this was prevented by the deaths of 56 men aboard U-869. The revelation of U-869's true story in 2025 became a turning point for all humanity. For the first time, people saw how close the world had come to self-destruction and the role ordinary individuals unknowingly played in preventing it. The international community responded immediately. A special task force was created. The U-869 Commission, composed of top scientists, ethicists, and world leaders, with the authority to suspend any research that might threaten human existence. Its first act was a temporary halt to experiments with quantum computers capable of instantly cracking the entire global cybersecurity infrastructure. "We will not repeat the mistakes of 1945, said the Commission's chairperson. "Technology must serve humanity, not destroy it." A month later, the U-869 protocol was signed, an international agreement requiring all nations to report the development of potentially dangerous technologies to the global community. The protocol was signed by all of the world's major powers. Despite the revolutionary discoveries, U-869 still keeps its secrets. Analysis of certain components of Wunderwaffe 7 revealed that they were made from materials that didn't exist in the 1940s. Even more puzzling, some parts contained isotopes that could only have appeared using technologies developed in the 1960s. Even stranger were the crew's notes about people from the future. Different crew members, who had no chance to coordinate stories, described identical visitors in white suits who predicted specific wartime events months before they occurred. The fate of Dr. Heisenberg remains a mystery. His body was never found among the remains of the crew, and damage to his cabin indicates that no one was inside at the moment of the explosion. An intriguing detail: in the 1960s, a physicist with the same name worked in the US, contributing to the early internet and space program. Coincidence, or something more? The 3 surviving Nordrobin submarines also vanished under mysterious circumstances. All were officially decommissioned or sunk as targets between 1946 and 1948. But witnesses claim that the explosions during their destruction were far more powerful than standard demolitions. Some researchers believe in the existence of a secret international organization that, after the war, systematically destroyed dangerous technologies. This could explain many Cold War anomalies and the sudden shutdown of promising scientific projects. Today, U-869 rests on the seafloor as an underwater memorial. Each year, international remembrance ceremonies are held above the wreck, attended by heads of state. A plaque on the submarine's hull bears the names of the fallen and the words, "They died not knowing they had saved the world." Museums have been built in their honor. An asteroid and a lunar crater have been named after the crew. But the greatest legacy of U-869 is the shift it caused in human thinking. New generations are now raised with the understanding that every technological achievement must be weighed against its ethical implications. AI developers refer to the U-869 principle, the willingness to stop research if it risks catastrophic consequences. The world's largest corporations have incorporated this principle into their ethics codes. In military academies worldwide, the story of U-869 is studied as a case where following orders could have led to disproportionate global consequences. Future officers are taught to consider not just tactical outcomes, but strategic risks to humanity. The story of U-869 is more relevant today than ever, as humanity stands on the threshold of new revolutions. Quantum computing, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and fusion energy, each capable of bringing either tremendous progress or unprecedented destruction. 56 people at the bottom of the Atlantic remind us that we always have a choice. We can use knowledge to build or to destroy, to unite or divide humanity. Our future depends on the decisions we make today. Their sacrifice saved the world from nuclear catastrophe and gave humanity a second chance. To grow, to learn, to pursue a better future. Today, as we dream of the stars, cure diseases once thought incurable, and create technologies of abundance, we must remember, all this was made possible by the choice of one crew in the cold waters of the Atlantic. The story of U-869 is not just a military mystery, it is a lesson in courage, wisdom, and responsibility. A reminder that ordinary people, at a critical moment, can change the course of history. And as long as humanity remembers this lesson, there is hope that we will build a future worthy of the sacrifice made by those heroes who chose to die so the world could live.